Let's talk about Afghanistan. You were, of course, U.S. ambassador to the UN during George W. Bush's tenure during the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And he, your first big boss, I guess you could say, said this week.
I think it is, yeah. Because I think the consequences are going to be unbelievably bad. And I'm sad. And Laura and I spend a lot of time with Afghan women, and they're scared. And I think about all the interpreters and people that helped, not only U.S. troops, but NATO troops. And they're just, it seems like they're just going to be left behind to be slaughtered by these very brutal people. And it breaks my heart.
Bush, to be clear, was asked if it was a mistake, and he said, I think it is. I know you agree with him on that. Perhaps for I think your singular, your guiding reason might be slightly different. I want to talk to you about that in a moment. But first, I want to ask you, why is Bush blasting Biden now when, even as you have said, Trump was going to do the same thing? Why is he doing this now?
Well, I think President Bush has done something really remarkable. It's how former presidents ought to behave. He's tried to stay out of politics. And it's been very rare when he's come forward and said anything like the passage you just showed. But I think it's because he remembers 9/11. It's 20 years ago now, and some people weren't born, and a lot of people don't remember it very well. George W. Bush is never going to forget it. And I think those of us who were in his administration at the time are never going to forget it. And the reason we went into Afghanistan was to punish those who did it and make sure it never happens again. And that really is the risk that we face now. The concern that Bush has shown for the people of Afghanistan, I think, is very real and very deep and widely shared among the American people.
It is widely shared. When you've been asked about the reason to stay, you say it's in the guiding interests of American national security. You say there could be another attack on the homeland, that it would be national security malpractice to sort of open up the possibility for that. But I want you to listen, if you could, to what General David Petraeus, who commanded troops in Afghanistan, said when I asked him about there becoming a threat to the homeland because of this drawdown.
I'm not as convinced that they will be able to threaten our homeland the way al-Qaeda did when it planned the 9/11 attacks on Afghan soil under Taliban control and also conducted the initial training of the attackers there. That would take a good bit longer, and I don't think they have that capability. Moreover, I'm much more confident in the capability of U.S. intelligence and a variety of other processes, organizations, and so forth that we've put together to ensure that we would detect something akin to a 9/11 attack.
What do you think about that?
Well, I don't think the risk of a terrorist attack from Afghanistan is going to come the day after Taliban takes back over. I do think it's going to take more time, and that's really what the risk is. I would rather defend innocent American civilians there than in the streets and the skies over America. And number two, there's another aspect to this. It's not just terrorism in Afghanistan. If Taliban takes back over, the hand of the extremist in Pakistan will be strengthened, and the risk of a Pakistani Taliban takeover of that government increases substantially, I think, unfortunately. And such a government would have control of dozens or scores of nuclear weapons, which everybody ought to be worried about. And we lose our ability to watch on the west of Afghanistan what Iran is up to. This was a central strategic position for the United States. We're giving it away. We're getting nothing in return.
But he still thinks that there are organizations, that there is intel in place that is going to prevent even what you are saying.
With all due respect, I don't think it's enough. There's simply no substitute for being on the ground and for not just the military forces that are there, but the other capabilities that we have that we can't sustain without the military being there.
So that is a forever war.
Well, I think the threat of terrorism is what we're talking about. It's not like American troops have been conducting a D-Day every day for the last 20 years. We have had foreign deployments since World War II for extended periods of time because it's in our national interest. The question isn't, do you like the length of the war or not? The question is, what do you do to best protect America?
Americans don't want it.
Americans have not been given the arguments for the last 15 years.
Sir, they've been given all of the arguments.
No, they haven't. They have not. one of the ironies here is that opponents of our presence in Afghanistan have been able to convince people that we're there purely as an act of charity for the Afghans. And many Americans would say, okay, it's time for them to defend themselves. The fact is, we're there for Americans. And that point was not made by Trump for 4 years. Biden doesn't agree with it, and it wasn't made by Obama.
But they're listening to, for instance, the assessment of someone like General David Petraeus, who was well respected and was on the ground commanding U.S. forces there, and he doesn't agree with you on that.
Well,
So I guess my point is then the Americans have reason in an educated way, taking in the opinions of experts to say, yes, that confirms that there should not be U.S. troops there.
Well, that may be their opinion. I'm not disputing the survey is correct, but I'm saying I think the arguments have not been made by the top leadership of America long enough to be able to convince them. And when you have an absence of debate, it's very easy for people to get a misimpression. This is an act of national security malpractice, I think, both by the Trump and by the Biden administrations. And I fear greatly that it's innocent people who will pay the price.
Do you look back on the mistakes made during the Bush administration and realize that has a lot to do with why Americans think that this is not a good idea?
Well, I don't think they have necessarily thought through what's right and what's wrong about it. What was right was to strike al-Qaeda and to do the damage to it that we did. I think where we veered off in the wrong direction was nation building, whether it's in Afghanistan or Iraq. And I come back to my basic point. We're not there for them. We're there for us. We're not going to build their nation for them. They're going to build it. But whether we're deployed there, as whether we're deployed in Germany, South Korea, or Japan, depends on a judgment what's in our interest. And to give those positions up, I think, is a big mistake.
Many differences between Afghanistan and Germany and Afghanistan and Japan.
But Germany, the deployments in Germany and Japan were part of a very long war, very long, a 45-year long war with communism that American leaders explained to the American people, and they were willing to sustain.
There was no social media.
That ended in,
right?
Look, social media don't make any difference. It's a question of leadership. You could convey it through a lot of different measures. Franklin Roosevelt started the fireside chat over radio. Leaders can use the media. The media shouldn't use the leaders. And if the leaders are making the case about what America's strategic interests in, and they can make the case effectively, Americans will support it, as they did during the Cold War.
But what about the parallels between Afghanistan and Vietnam?
Well, I think the parallels that people are drawing are incorrect at this point. The issue we're talking about in Afghanistan is not continued combat operations. It's been a long time since it was seriously a war that involved American troops. What we're talking about is making sure that terrorists don't take sufficient base in Afghanistan or in Pakistan
you're trying to
attack
argue,
the United
you're
States.
trying to say that we, the U.S., you're trying to say the U.S. hasn't been at war in the conventional sense with the involvement of U.S. troops.
I'm saying the terrorist threat to the United States is not a conventional military threat, and it takes a different kind of response. And that's what we've been trying to do in Afghanistan. Saying, well, the Afghans have to defend themselves is a little bit like saying, well, you know, the Belgians are going to have to defend themselves against the Germans, and if they can't, it's a European problem. It's a long way away. The issue is not the Belgians or the Afghans. The issue is what keeps America safest. And I think having deployments in Afghanistan and in Iraq to prevent the terrorists from getting sufficient sanctuary so they can plan and implement attacks on the United States or our friends and allies, very much in the interest of innocent American civilians.
Did the U.S. lose the war in Afghanistan?
No, I don't. I think we've walked away from it. I think it's a huge mistake.
How can you, walking away,
That's
how is that not, I mean, can you explain what you mean by that?
Because we weren't defeated. You have to be defeated to lose a war. We've given up because we've lost patience. That's a sad commentary about the current administration, but it's not a defeat for the United States.
So it's just attrition then, basically.
It's a mistake.
It's a mistake, as you say. I'm curious what you think about, you know, we've heard from President Biden where he said that you have to get out, right? That this is going.
The question is a risk assessment. And my judgment is that removing American forces increases the risk to American civilians.
Yes, and there's disagreement on that. But what his point was that you have American troops there. The Taliban was slowing down its attacks because there were obviously ongoing negotiations and they were awaiting the withdrawal of U.S. troops. And so they actually pulled back. He said to maintain a U.S. presence would have put U.S. troops at considerable harm. And you have, as you're aware, you have the sons, certainly, I don't know, maybe the daughters as well, of Afghan veterans who have served in Afghanistan.
And never forget what the Taliban say. So, referring to Americans, they say, "You have the watches, we have the time."